There are a couple words, phrases of both senseis which express the enlightenment, you could say, of Aikido, in the sense that we talk about the enlightenment in Zen or in Advaita Vedanta or in Dzogchen. Buddhism generally, you talk about awakening. And those are Uchu Sonomono, which is the universe as it is. The universe as it is. Which you can see has various feelings around it. One is, it's not based on what men can describe or not describe. It's the universe as it is. And then the other, which Sensei said, is that the person who practices should eventually be able to say, or can be saying, because it's a form of enlightenment, so it could actually happen at any time. I am the universe. So that requires a little thought, because the normal separate person, when they say I, they think I as a separate person with a separate history and dealing with a world which is separate from me, which is what normally people feel when they say I. That I cannot say I am the universe. Mm. So, and of course, that I would be the I that would want to get better in terms of techniques, would want to feel strong in terms of, being able to, say, handle themselves on a tough street or in a British bar or pub, I think they call it, right? And just feel, I'm. A lot of people, feel somewhere on a hierarchy with a lot of stuff above them. And so Aikido is a place where they can rise in the hierarchy, because you can, if you practice well and you're, whatever dojo you're in, if you're kind of in tune with the way it's being taught in that dojo, you get grades, and then you rise in a hierarchy. Things like that. And that, of course, has nothing to do with the other. It's like Sensei also, expressed in his first enlightenment the discovery that of the all-pervading love of God or the divine, which we could call unconditional love, as a reality. And that he then realized that Aikido's purpose is to find that love and to make it yours. So this is stuff at the very heart of Aikido. And for me, the techniques make no meaning unless they somehow connect with this. Now there's another thing about Uchu Sonomono, about the universe, which is that it seems that Aikido is a progression, right? That you do this and then that leads to this and that leads to this. But that's not true. The techniques themselves, Aikido itself, is the universe as it is. And it's always there anyways. I mean, even without the techniques, it's just kind of bringing it forward, bringing it right to you. And you could say that the discovery of the universe as it is, that one is the universe as it is, that there is no separation, that there is no separate I. This is enlightenment and can happen any time. You have whole practices, for instance, the Buddhist practices particularly, well, all the Buddhist practices, but I would say particularly the Tibetan practices and Zen, regional Zen, can bring this about. So why Aikido? So again, in Aikido, it's this, but we're in the context of Bu. We're in the context also of learning as human beings and changing the way human beings have seen what might be called power as expressed by and through human beings in the history of mankind. In Aikido, there is no comparison of strength. In Aikido, the strength of Aikido, the word power, strength, in Aikido, in O-sensei's talking and writing, is in the phrase in Ryoku. Ryoku meaning power, strength. In means, well, the ideogram is of a bow, archery bow. And it has to do with pulling, drawing, which can be actually physical or like gravity. And in Aikido we talk about the pulling or the drawing, the inryoku of the spirit that draws the person. So this is completely another world from the world of up to now, where this side is strong and attacks, this side can defend itself. Its defense is better than the attack, so then it then wins, or it's not as strong enough and the attack wins. So you always have these, weapons and defenses and, strategies. War. And of course the mistranslation of Bu you can see in German, where it's very clear, Kampfkunst. And in French or English you can say martial arts, art martial. The word martial that has to do with war, with soldiers, with that kind of power. Misnomers. And there is a certain scholarly question about the meaning of Bu and Take and so on and so forth, but the character which is now used, which has been in use for I think 1,000 or 2,000 years, says to stop attack. And O-sensei in some of his writings actually talks about that. Bu meaning to stop attack. So they say you can find other meanings if you go way back and so on and so forth. And then you have the Japanese phrase take, of course, which had no character for it. That was when they brought in the Chinese stuff. But at a simple level and at a basic level, I think it can stay with stop attack. To bring about the end of attack, which in a sense is to bring about the end of war. Right? Because it's the attack that starts war. You don't defend against nothing. Right? And so, stop, the character stop, is part of the character for Bu, the Chinese character for Bu. And so that the most deepest human experience and spiritual knowledge is found in Aikido, but in this context. And it's interesting, just thinking about it. I mean, this is just something, but actually, the story of the great Tibetan master Milarepa, what led him to enlightenment was, you might call, normal Bu, attack and defense. That is, when his father died, his uncle took over his father's territory, house, everything, possessions. His brother, the uncle, took it over, and Milarepa and his sister and mother were slaves of the uncle. That's an attack. And the mother said, Milarepa, you got to do something about this. We can't just... So Milarepa escaped and met a Tibetan master of, you could call black, or let's call it just black powers available through meditation. And the teacher said to Milarepa that normally he wouldn't teach it because, of course, it's really heavy stuff, but he heard Milarepa's story, said, "Your story has touched me, so I will teach you." So Milarepa learned how to use what essentially a kind of black magic that he could create through meditation, and attacked, with his mind, but successfully, his uncle, and succeeded. So he came back to his village and he found dead bodies and, broken buildings and, a real, just like a bombing attack, right? And he was so horrified at what he had done, right? His mother, of course, was quite happy that this led him to eventually find his real master and his real enlightenment, his real awakening. Now, it's interesting. It just occurred to me, I'm not relating it to anything other than that as a story of typical Bu, right? Bad guy does something bad, uses power, you get more power and get him back. But in that case, it led Milarepa, when he saw what he had done, to then search for a real master, and became Milarepa one of the greatest saints of human history. But again, Aikido deals with that thing, right? And that story, it's separate. Milarepa gets into a kind of fight which he wins, and wins so well that he's so horrified that he then goes to enlightenment. But in Aikido, the enlightenment and the issue of Bu, of the issue of power between human beings, is one thing. So it makes it quite unique. And so we can call it a Buddha of oneness. To me, this is very clear looking at O-sensei practicing that. The one thing which defines all his moves, once he has his enlightenment, is the oneness with his partner. So we have oneness, we have inryoku, we have these things at the base of something which people normally looking at it from the outside without any experience say, well, that's a martial art. So this is quite special, right? Aikido is quite special and quite important for humankind, because it actually shows, it models a power relationship between human beings where there is not a loser. And where the one who has more power does not accumulate power to the loss of others. Never before, as far as I know, has this been so. Even in the Tibetan society, although within the Buddhist world of the monasteries and the people who practice, real practitioners, there was not much of a problem, you could say, of Bu or power, although the monasteries did accumulate a certain kind of power. Tibetan society was a feudal society in which the lower class were serfs, essentially. So, really, Aikido is something new. And for us, as Aikido practitioners, to ignore this is, I don't know what word is, shameful. We're not doing Aikido. John Stevens calls Aikido the art of peace. Of course, he's trying to take the word martial and change it, right? To me, it's kind of cute, but You understand what he's trying to do. I agree. To me, that's banal to call Aikido the art of peace. How can you have an art of peace? Right? It's not an art of peace. It's an art of dealing with power in a new way. Now, it's true that you could say that through the teaching of Aikido, war should become non-existent or minimal. So in that sense, you would say it's the art of peace. I mean, how can you really disagree with it? To me, it just doesn't, it's like, just too easy thing to say, the art of peace, as though it's the art of peace. It's not the art of peace, it's misogi. Osensei never said Aikido was the art of peace. He didn't use any Japanese words on that level. He called Aikido Shin no Budo, which is to make divine love something which you also are and give out. And it's misogi, which is spiritual purification. But it does model a new way for human beings in regard to power, and that modeling shows the possibility of an end to war or a minimalization of war, and the same kind of, you develop yourself fully, right? Just like if you're a great warrior, you have more and more power, and you whatever. But it's not based on war with others. There's no loser in Aikido. And in fact, we know, speaking very simply, that when Aikido is done well, the person receiving the technique, their body and their whole being gets better as a result of being thrown or pinned, if Aikido is done correctly. And there is no separation between the two. The thrower and the throwee, the uke and the nage are one, in one movement, which includes both like a yang and yin symbol. This is something new. And without this, and it gives, I was going to say, without this orientation, Aikido is meaningless. And so the orientation gives a certain direction and a certain energy to our practice. A direction and energy which is more than, say, perfecting my technique or whatever people try to do as they improve in Aikido. So, and again, we must repeat that at this time, where if things keep going the way they are, something like 6 or 7 people out of 9 will have to die, or most complex life will not survive, where it's even possible that most of the earth, instead of being green and blue, will become brown, right? Because of misunderstanding of Bu, right? At this time, this aspect, this part of Aikido's purpose is, unequaled importance. It's an education, it's a revelation for human beings. Even just something simple like when Osensei talks about Kwan and Haku, basically materialist and spiritual, or the spirit and the material, that this is a world based on the material, and that Aikido should bring about a switch so it becomes a world based on the spirit through the practice and the experience of Aikido. So our practice must open to this big purpose of Aikido. It's not for us as a hobby, or as a profession, as a way of making money. Impossible. In terms of money, I think the position of Course in Miracles is correct, which is if someone does something like teaching Aikido, he should receive money. He should be able to live at some basic standard, but he should never do it for money. The Course talks about that in regard to psychotherapists, and people like that, coaches, healers. I think it applies as well to Aikido. So we have this before us as a possibility that we can practice and demonstrate this new way for this time where everything is on the line. And we who practice Aikido must include this or make this central to our practice. If we don't, you could say we are ripping off ourselves, we're ripping off Osensei, we're ripping off the world. It's almost a crime. Can't say that the people who practice karate. Karate is karate. I mean, you can't say, but Aikido, yeah. So really, those who practice Aikido must consider these things, explore them, and integrate them with their lives and their practice.